Hello, viewers. Today, I'm honored that our show is joined by Colonel Larry Wilkerson. Colonel Larry Wilkerson needs no introduction. He has spent over 30 years in U.S. military. He is a retired colonel in the U.S. military. He has also worked as a diplomat, as a chief of staff of Secretary of State Colin Powell. All in all, a brilliant individual, understands the region, the Middle Eastern politics, the US politics. So we are really glad to have him in our show today. Thank you, sir.
Glad to be with you. I hope I can live up to that introduction.
Thank you. So, could you just give our audience a, a lay down a general landscape, a political and a military landscape of this conflict, which has now engulfed not only Middle East, but it has repercussions all over the world.
Well, you've just summed it up pretty well right there. I think there are three levels of looking at this conflict. The first level, most people don't even know how to contemplate. They don't dwell in this world. And I'm not saying that I do, except I did every now and then. And I think that every now and then gave me some special credentials for talking about it. And that's the geopolitical, geostrategic level. We use those words, we throw them around. What the hell do they mean, you know? Well, basically, they mean global impacts and global power moves and global chicanery and global wealth and all the things that we kind of think about in a comic book fashion, but don't really believe. And yet look back on history and see how the Rothschilds and the Medicis and a host of other people I could name have run the world, basically have run the world. They ran it through people like Napoleon and people like even imperial Caesars in both the Byzantine or the Eastern Roman Empire and the Western Empire. And they're with us today. They just have modern manifestations. One of the ones who has come out very visibly is Elon Musk. And another one is Peter Thiel, but he lurks behind the vice president. All to say that I think there are people in the global community, and Trump is ignorant of this completely. So are most of his cabinet, if not all of them, who want the United States to stand up to China and stop it cold in its tracks. There are various places to do that. One was taken on by Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan, and I think less cogently by Joe Biden, because I think he was losing it by the time he came to the end of his administration. But Ukraine was as much about stopping China as it was in confronting Russia. And what it did, of course, it backfired to a certain extent because it sort of cemented at least a tacit alliance between Moscow and Beijing. But this war in Southwest Asia is a part of this. It's an attempt to thwart the latest base road initiative physically expressed by the Chinese in the railroad that now links Iran and will link, if they're allowed to finish it, the Caucasus as it runs up the Persian Gulf, the old route. That's an old trade route. It was even used by the British and us in the 1939-40 period. We refurbished it to use it for World War II, and we supplied the Soviets almost as much through that route as we did through Murmansk, the more famous route for World War II. So we're trying to stop that. That, in a nutshell, what that does is it reduces China's Pacific ports produce from a 2.5 to 3 day journey by sea to about 16 hours by railroad. And that's a colossal change. And if that gets into Europe, and gets into the rest of the world, literally, then the Chinese have just stolen a march on the American empire, because we're a maritime nation and we're the ones who protect the oceans and we're the ones who provide freedom of navigation and control the seas and all that crap. Most of that is done for our own benefit these days, but nonetheless, that's what they're negating if they complete these railroads. And now this is the fifth one of them. They've got the northern one, the northern central one. These are through Russia principally. Then they've got the central one through the Central Asian countries, and now they've got this one, which goes all the way around the southern coast of Iran and starts to go up the Persian Gulf. So we're trying to stop that. And I don't know if Trump even knows this. I'm pretty sure Pete Hegseth doesn't know it. I'm quite confident the director of the CIA, who's an idiot, doesn't know it. I'm not sure anyone, I'm not even sure that the director of national intelligence knows this. But there are people behind this administration who want to use this administration and are doing a good job of using it to stop China in this very important Southern Base Road Initiative. That's the big top level. In the center, if you will, the level that we watch all the time on television and elsewhere, is Trump and Hegseth and all the rest of his administration now falling apart very quickly. And they are trying to gain political ground with this war in Iran. They are also trying to fulfill their promise, much paid for by the American taxpayer, to Israel. And many would say that this level really is all about Israel. And it's about the umbilical cord that is marked with dollars, made out of dollars, that connects Bibi Netanyahu and Donald Trump through people like Miriam Adelson and others. So that's the center level. And then there's what I call the tactical level, which is Donald Trump just seems to have, of late, and I think he's always been this way, he's just hidden it like war. He seems to have fallen in love with his potential to be a killer. And to be a killer on a very wide scale. If you listen to his remarks just a few moments ago, by the way, I was down in Washington and I couldn't move. They moved the perimeter of the White House out further. I've been here 35 years, further than I've ever seen it. I mean, I had to go miles to get around that perimeter and get to the location I was trying to reach. Normally 30-minute drive, it was over an hour and a half drive. The only thing I can see why they did that is they're very, very, very scared now of drones, because we've had a number of drone scares in this area. We've had drone scares all across the country. We've had people reporting, rightly or wrongly, hordes of drones over their businesses and over their townships and such. I don't know how much of this is real, but I know the White House must be taking it as being real, because I've never seen a perimeter as wide as this one was around the White House. So I think those are the three levels, and we're having to deal with all three of them. The most dangerous one, I think, is the top one, because what that is producing in its effort to thwart China is probably a global recession. And if it goes on much longer, probably a global depression, because we're impacting lines of communications so adversely with the Strait of Hormuz, and now probably the Bab el-Mandeb Strait as well, the Red Sea and the Strait of Hormuz. That's probably 65, 70% of maritime commerce. Another reason why China wants to go over land. You go back and look at the empires of the past, you'll see this has happened a couple of times before. The land merchants get tired of paying the extra fees they have to pay for shipping across the waters, whether it's the Byzantine Empire or whether you go back to Genghis Khan. They get tired of doing that, and so they create land routes. And when they create really effective land routes, it kills the Portuguese Empire, for example, because there's no more commerce of note on the high seas because everyone's going across the land. And by the way, usually land commerce is a lot easier to secure than maritime commerce. Piracy has always been with us on the high seas. Piracy sometimes on land too, but it's much easier to protect your columns of trade with flank guards and so forth on land than it is on sea. And it's not nearly as expensive because ships are very expensive, and very few countries, in history have really had powerful navies. But lots of countries have had powerful militaries that could protect land routes for trade. All to say that I think if we go on further, Trump and Putin both believe, I think, Putin probably less so than Trump because Putin's smarter, but they believe that their possession of enormous amounts of petroleum products will protect them from this depression. But I think I have some news for both of them, and I don't think I have news for Putin. I think he probably understands this and he's worried about it. Even though you do have your own petroleum and you think you can hold out against this because you do, you're going to suffer greatly when global communications are hampered to the extent they're going to be, because you're going to find out you can't get a lot of products that the people who elect you think they ought to have. And those they can get are going to be sky high expensive. So I don't think this has really been thought out well by Trump. No, it hasn't. And I'm not sure that Putin is going to be able to handle it the way he seems to think he can too. He thinks he has plenty of land routes. And of course, who gives him the land routes? China. So it's going to be a difficult time for the globe, I think, because we have some really dumb people orchestrating force in ways that aren't going to be very beneficial for the rest of the globe. In fact, aren't right now. Look at Taiwan. Taiwan is really sweating bullets right now because it's not getting any petroleum products. It normally has on hand about a 15-day supply. So look, we're into this war more than that now. So I imagine they're sweating bullets right now, trying to figure out how they're going to get what they need, not to mention helium, urea, and other things that come out of the Strait of Hormuz. So that's a long-winded way of describing it, but I think we're looking at a three-dimensional conflict, if you will. And Donald Trump only understands the basics, and those not very well.
Sir, I want to understand your point of view about what happened during the nights last Thursday and Friday in southern Iran, because there are a lot of contradictory news. There's a lot of fog and haze around the operation, what happened. What did you make up of this evidence that has come up so far? I mean, it's very sparse evidence, but what did you make of based upon your military experience and your political experience happened last weekend?
Right now, I think we are in a situation where Trump is trying to lie his way out of a real mess he's got himself into. And one of the things he's doing with this lying is he's constructing these narratives like he gave today. If you think about it just for a moment, why would a president of the United States start a war the size of the one he started with Iran and dwell on things like rescued pilots and dwell on things like the aircraft went down here, the aircraft went down there, they did this, they did that? All of these things are what I would call, as a military professional, insignificant, really. The scope of the conflict is huge, and Iran has shown how huge it is and is going to show probably even more in terms of tier two. That's what I call them. I think that's the kind of Persian phrase that the Farsi translates into that. The first tier was targets that they said, we're only going to hit U.S. targets in the region. They even were apologizing to people whom they hit in doing that. In other words, if they hit a Saudi person or they hit a Saudi facility, they weren't trying to do that. They were trying to hit Prince Sultan Air Base and destroy U.S. equipment. They were trying to hit the Mossad MI6 CIA facility up in Kurdistan. They were trying to hit other things. once they started on this second tier, and I think one of the targets there was the Amazon facility in Saudi Arabia, for example, um, that's really going to be of global impact. And I think they have far more targets they're going to hit. Let's just take, for example, what would happen if they hit Ras Tanura in Saudi Arabia. That's about 550,000 barrels a day throughput capacity. What would happen if they hit the one up the beach a little ways, UNIF, I think they call it? That's 7%. 7% of the world's global supply of really good oil. Used to get a lot of it from Libya, light sweet crude, that sort of thing. 7% of the supply, it's something like 7 million barrels a day in that complex. If they hit that, that would be really a disaster for all those countries that aren't being allowed to get anything out of the Strait of Hormuz, those countries that are supporting the United States. And if the Houthis were to really close down the Red Sea again, which they have shown the capacity to do, then we'd be looking at 60% of the world's commerce that goes by sea goes that route. Then you have to go add another day or two and a lot of expense if you're going to go around the Horn of Africa. So all to say, again, I don't think he understands what he's doing. And he's focused on these tiny little items. And today he started describing what the Iranians looked like when they were being shot. And they were being shot by their own people was the insinuation. Well, we know conclusively now, that amongst those Iranian were Mossad and MI6 and CIA pushing the Iranians forward and often pushing them into the bullets that killed them. And Mike Pence made a real mistake by saying, oh, and shake the hand of the Mossad agent beside you, talking about the protesting Iranians. So he's presenting a fabricated picture of Iran in order to try and keep as much of his MAGA base as possible on his side. At the same time, he's not really doing a whole lot about Iran's capacity to do what I just said. He's perpetrating war crimes from one end of Iran to the other. He's killing innocents. He's bombing hospitals. He's bombing bridges. He's bombing nurseries. He's bombing children. The opening strike, if you will, Manab School. He's just stated he's doing war crimes. He's set down objectives, many of which are war crimes. Bomb them back to the Stone Age. Who was it? Was it the Speaker of the Majlis that came back and said, please do that, and showed a picture of the Stone Age and the Persian Empire, which encompassed most of the Mediterranean basin in the Stone Age. Okay, please take us back to the Stone Age. That's how ignorant he is. And he's waging this war and he's killing people. And he's not succeeding. So where are we going? That's the huge question right now. Where are we going? And oh, by the way, his buddy attached by umbilical cord in Tel Aviv isn't going anywhere either, except getting beat all over the map. He's being hounded, he's being harassed, and he's being defeated, just like he was in 2006 by Hezbollah in Lebanon. And he hasn't cleaned out Hamas. Naftali Bennett is angry at him because he has not cleaned out those tunnels in Gaza, and he isn't going to. And he's in a mess in the West Bank, even though he's given the IDF now permission to help the settlers kill everybody in their way. So he's got a true mess, and he's being pounded every night and every day by Iranian missiles, and he's running out. I saw the chart the other day of the 6 most critical missiles that they need in order to respond to Iranian attacks. And they had 2 days, 4 days, 6 days, and 7 days, respectively, of those missiles. Talking about David Sling and THAAD and Patriots and such. Deeper into their inventory, they have better stocks, but Iran is pounding them, and they're not going to get these stocks out and use them until it's absolutely critical. I'm really worried about him getting something from Dimona, a nuclear weapon or two, and using that. So we're looking at, and we have another phenomenon going on right now with Iran as well. I don't know if you're aware of it. Dr. Ted Postol professor emeritus up at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, has done an analysis, and I think he's right. He thinks the Iranians squirreled away, put away, deep underground, enough enriched uranium to make several bombs, and that they have the knowledge of how to make the warhead and how to match the warhead with one of their better missiles, like the Khurram Shah, for example. And that if they want to, they can do that in a very short period of time, deep underground. So then we would be faced with a Bibi Netanyahu who thinks he has the ultimate weapon to use against Iran, should Israel be in existential circumstances. But maybe Iran has got one to use back on him. And just look at the map and see how big Iran is, as big as Western Europe, and how little Israel is. 2 nuclear weapons on Israel would pretty much finish it off. 2 nuclear weapons on Iran would be, unless they were dropped on Tehran or some other Isfahan, some other city, would do very little damage, really. So we're looking at a very disparate balance of power, if you will, should Iran have a nuclear weapon, because Israel's so small.
So you have worked with various administrations. You have been a chief of staff of Colonel Powell. I want to name 3 individuals: President Donald Trump, Pete Hegseth, and Abbas Araghchi. Who do you think is the adult in the room when the push has come to shove in the last 6 weeks?
I don't think there's any question about it. Just like Wang Yi from Beijing and Sergei Lavrov from Moscow, Abbas Araghchi is a very good diplomat, a very smart man. In English or Farsi, he's very smart. I think he, in any room other than one with Wang Yi and Sergei Lavrov, would be the top man in the room. And I think he would face down Marco Rubio or Pete Hegseth or Donald Trump without any problem whatsoever. That's part of our problem in this country now, in America now. It's part of our problem. You know, we haven't even filled 40% of our ambassadorial spots around the world. And many of the spots, the highest percentage, I was told about a week ago by a friend at the State Department, the highest percentage of political appointees, most of whom they consider these people that I'm talking to as basically incompetent. They gave Trump a lot of money, and so he gave them an embassy. And in most cases, they're typical Trumpsters. They really don't have a lot of diplomatic experience, and that's being kind. They don't have a lot of brain power either. That's probably more accurate. So we do not have a diplomatic force out there. I'll give you an example, because one of the worst places we did this is, and it's still the case, is Southwest Asia. When the Iranians hit Bahrain so devastatingly, took out the oldest refinery in the Gulf, destroyed it completely, took out our Fifth Fleet headquarters. The people in Bahrain from the United States in the Navy or supporting the Navy, Fifth Fleet, were given 10 to 12 hours to get everything in a kit bag, no bigger than a kit bag, a tiny little bag, put it and go. And then they got out. They got flights out. They got boats out. However they could get out, they got out. Well, they just arrived back in Norfolk, 2,000 of them, Norfolk, Virginia, their home base. There was no space for them. There was no place for them to live. There was no place for them to eat, nor bathe, nor brush their teeth, or anything else. So right now, the citizens of that area, from Norfolk, from Chesapeake, from Hampton Roads, and so forth, in Virginia, are putting these people up. They're helping them survive, because no one foresaw what Iran was going to do. They didn't think Iran would do these sorts of things. So they didn't evacuate. They didn't get any of these people out. I suspect that's probably the case throughout the region, wherever you're looking, Riyadh, Prince Sultan, in Iraq. We have put our embassy in Baghdad down to just emergency personnel. I suspect we've done that throughout the region. I don't know how widespread that, it might even include Cairo. So I know we are very worried about our people being hit by drones and other things, and by assassins and hit squads and such from Iran. That's what we're saying anyway. And it could well be true. So we've got a very dangerous situation for Americans in Southwest Asia. The State Department has cautioned people about any travel at all in that region. So it's a very dangerous place right now. And I think, as I said, I think the Iranians are getting ready to hit a second time. And this is going to be a much wider spread array of missiles that come out, hitting economic targets principally rather than military targets.
Sir,
it's a dangerous situation, no question about it.
Sir, I want to understand about the way forward. Do you think we are just in the initial phases of this conflict, or do you think this conflict is about to end either through a negotiated settlement?
If you listen to Trump, even today, although it was mostly incoherent, you'd think it's going to be over any moment. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's even talking about, as he did at the cabinet meeting a few days ago, the negotiations. Well, there aren't any negotiations. The Pakistanis, the Omanis, and others are trying desperately to conduct some sort of third-party negotiations, but there are no Iranians facing Americans anywhere. They simply are not talking to one another. They refuse to talk to one another. I don't think it's the American side that's refusing. It's the Iranian side. And Araghchi, Foreign Minister Araghchi, has been pretty clear about it. We have three requirements, one of which is you get out of the area, period. You get out of Southwest Asia. When you get out of Southwest Asia, send a diplomat back and we might talk to him. But we're not sure we even want to do it then, because you've torpedoed negotiations twice and killed us in the middle of the torpedoing. So we don't trust you at all. So when you leave, then maybe we'll accept one of your diplomats coming back in to talk to us. Until then, we're not talking to you. That's pretty much what they've said. Now, are they serious? Are they going to do this even to the extent that they're going to continue to lose bridges and schools and hospitals and people? I think probably they are. Can they hold that posture for an extended period of time? I think probably they can. So what is Trump going to do when he keeps coming to these deadlines he sets? And I tried to count them the other day. I think there's about six. If you go, that he's set and then backed off, set and then backed off. What's going to happen? Because there is no negotiation going on. The Chinese and the Pakistanis put out their 5-point plan. It just went right down the toilet. Yeah. And others have expressed this or that view of it. And the Iranians have just essentially rebuffed it all. So I don't know, maybe they'll wake up one morning and say, we've lost enough here. Maybe we should start to talk. But I don't think so. But we keep acting like they're going to. We keep acting like if we drop a few more bombs, they will come. They will talk. I don't think so. So, are we going to fight? There's, probably about 92 million of them left. Are we going to fight till 92 million Iranians are dead? Trump seems to think so.
So moving on to the another theater of this conflict, which has just boiled up recently, is southern Lebanon and northern Israel. We were told, sir, repeatedly by US media, by British media, Western media in general, and also Israeli media, that IDF has completely wiped out the resistance in Lebanon because of their decapitation strike and because of the strikes after October 7, 2023. But suddenly, out of nowhere, this resistance has just sprang up. But the information is not very definitive. Can you please explain what is actually going on in southern Lebanon?
I think the same thing is going on in southern Lebanon as went on in southern Lebanon back in 2006. The Israelis are being beaten. I've seen smuggled out videos of lines of Merkava tanks going in just across the Litani River. And they go in an administrative road march. In other words, they're not very far apart. And they go in with no overhead cover whatsoever, which the IDF Armored Corps should have learned from Ukraine, that you don't want to not have any kind of overhead cover. And the Ukrainians build actually tent-like things on top of their tanks. And I've watched these tanks, these Israeli tanks, be hit by drones. I've watched the rear one killed, the lead one killed, and then one near the center killed. And then I've watched on these videos tankers leaving their tanks and running up the hill. That's not your vaunted IDF Armored Corps, but they don't have any choice because they're being destroyed. Now, Hezbollah has studied Ukraine. Hezbollah has not only studied Ukraine, they have gotten some of the equipment that Ukraine makes. I think, frankly, that Zelensky is selling to anyone who has the money. He's selling to Saudi Arabia. He's selling to Israel. He's selling to Hezbollah. He's selling to Iran. Whomever has the money, he's selling. So these drones are everywhere. And Israel has shown a very decided lack of capacity to deal with them. And they're losing more tanks than they've ever lost before, except maybe in the 73 war. And that wasn't for very long. So I don't think they're winning in Lebanon. They made a huge mistake. And Netanyahu makes this mistake a lot. He killed the only man in Hezbollah that I knew, that I could see, who was as interested in, if not more interested in, political solutions as he was force solutions, military solutions. And that was Nasrallah. Killing Hassan Nasrallah was a real mistake, as Bibi has made several times. He's killed people whom he could have dealt with and then moved on to someone who took over, who isn't going to deal with him flat. And that's a problem. That's a problem with assassinating leaders. It's not a very good practice. It's a war crime too, but it's not a very good practice. So now there's no one in Hezbollah except people who want to kill Israelis, and he's up against them. He just asked Jelani in Damascus to join. He wants Jelani to bring his forces to bear on Hezbollah. Jelani refused. So Netanyahu is now figuring out how he can, by force, compel Jelani to join him. I don't think he's going to do that. I don't think he's going to be able to succeed in that. So they're alone now. They're alone against Hezbollah, and they're frankly being beaten.
Moving on to, sir, another stakeholder in this conflict is the GCC countries. See, they have put their eggs in the American basket for the last 50 years. And it seems like their illusion of, luxury has been completely shattered in this conflict. They have egged on both the Israelis and the US to finish the job in Iran. But seems like they are struggling to meet their objectives. So what do you think is the future of these countries, sir? Because they do not have any significant military assets.
I think you're right. I think like NATO, the GCC, and the GCC probably even more so than NATO, is crumbling fast. And its principal funder, its principal sovereign fund holder, and its principal country with regard to at least some military might, not a lot, but at least some. Saudi Arabia is making alternative plans. I don't know if you've heard about what MBS expressed with regard to the pipelines that he was going to build up through northern Saudi Arabia and into Israel and over to Turkey. And these are going to be enormously game-changing, because all the oil flowing through the Strait of Hormuz now, well, not all of it, but a good portion of it would go either through the pipeline over to Jeddah on the Red Sea, or more and more it would go up these pipelines headed north and through Israel. That was the deal. They were going to go through Israel. And of course, Israel would be able to get its share and get transshipment fees too, and then over to Ceyhan or somewhere else in Turkey. Yesterday, very solid evidence came out that MBS has changed his mind, that he is going to go through Syria instead and avoid Israel altogether. If that's true, that's a game changer. That means the Abraham Accords or anything even remotely like them are dead. That means the GCC is probably going to die too, because there's going to be a different configuration if there's a new alliance, and it will probably include Syria. Riyadh will make sure of that if indeed pipelines are going to go up through Syria. And one wonders what Erdogan and Turkey are going to do ultimately too. I suspect they would rather see them come through Syria than they would see them go through Israel. Now that Erdogan has finally found his voice. Well, he's always had his voice,
yes,
but he's found some oomph in terms of dealing with both the Kurds. Essentially, the Kurds were being asked by us to go in and help with the Iran war, and the Kurds said, "No, thank you. We'll have Erdogan behind us and the Iranians in front of us. No, we're not doing that." Thank God for the Kurdish leadership this time. They usually make the wrong decision. They made the right one this time. They told us, "No, we're not doing it." But it's going to, and I haven't even talked about if these targets get hit. If these targets get hit in Saudi Arabia, we may wind up with a second violent Arab Spring. We may wind up with the people in the streets suddenly realizing that all the people over them are running with their money into the desert or whatever. I had a conversation with Prince Bandar one time. One of his force holders, actually, Bandar, was talking to Powell, and it was something like this. You Americans think that if the oil ran out, or if somehow someone took the oil from us or whatever, that we'd be all dead and gone. Not true. We go back into the desert and get our tents out and eat some dates. And we will not, if the oil's gone, we will not die. I guarantee you, we'll still be there. We'll go back to our old ways of living. They may be having to think about that as things go on. I wouldn't be surprised if something happened. The problem with that is you never know how it's going to come out. You never know how other countries are going to react, how the empire is going to react, how they're going to get in there and screw it up for the people. I don't think you'd see a full-blown democracy or anything remotely resembling it, but it'd have to be better than these monarchies.
Sir, to borrow a phrase from Sherlock Holmes, the dog that is not barking is Russia.
Yeah.
What do you think Russia's role in this current conflict? And do you think that it is in Russia's vested interest that this conflict should prolong so that they have cushion and space in Ukraine? Or do you think it's in their interest that the conflict just wind up as soon as possible?
That's a very interesting question, and I have a very different kind of view of this. And I don't know exactly how to express it and work it, because I know Trump knows that Putin is helping Iran. Everyone knows that, I think. Everyone with even a remotely good intelligence agency knows that Russia's helping Iran. Perhaps not to the depth of their help, but they know there's help. Some of the things that have happened because Russians are there orchestrating it happening in Iran. So why isn't Trump speaking out about that? Why isn't Trump chastising Putin? Why isn't Trump really, taking Putin on every now and then if that's happening? I don't think there's a bad relationship between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. I think if for some uncanny reason, Putin believes that he must have a positive relationship with Washington, even after he's destroyed NATO The transatlantic link is broken, and there's nothing but America on the other side of the Atlantic with no connections to Germany, to France, or anyone else in Europe. He still wants a relationship. I don't know how to say why, but I sense that he does, and I sense that Trump knows that, and so Trump is not angry with it, and understands that he's got Ukraine on his hands, understands that Trump has not done anything but make Ukraine worse for him, and yet he still wants a relationship with Trump. So that's strange. I don't know how to parse it. I don't know how to deal with it. Other than I think we're going to have loggerheads approach us and have to really make some difficult decisions if this war in Southwest Asia continues, because Trump is going to become more and more frustrated that he can't handle it, that he can't get out of it. He can't get out of it, and he doesn't want to stay in it. I mean, that's where he's going to be. And Bibi's keeping him tied to it. And Putin is helping, and probably is going to help more as it goes along. So I think both leaders believe, as I said before in this bigger picture, they both believe that their possession of lots of oil, as Trump likes to say, keeps them free of all this global conflict that's going to take place over not having enough oil. But what does it keep them free to do? It keeps Putin free to prosecute a conflict that he's once again broken down in. He's not moving very fast, and he's taking a lot of casualties. And Zelensky's all over the place, creating new allies and new monies for himself, selling drones to everybody and anybody that'll buy them. So it's a strange group of people. By all intents and purposes, we should have shut Ukraine down a long time ago. Even if it festers for 20 years with the Ukrainian partisans going into Russian territory and disturbing things, which they will do. They will do. The French have an expression for the Balkans. Oh, that's so Balkan, meaning that's hideous. Well, that's the same thing for Ukraine. So it won't settle down for a long time, but we need to stop the massive killing. We need to stop that. It's just getting out of hand now. And if Russia does push all the way down and solidify the southern border and take Odessa and make Ukraine nothing but a rump state, then you've got all these other countries that have historical grudges with Ukraine, like Poland, who will start looking at it like, ooh, I think I'd like my territory back, that sort of thing. And then you got a real problem. And you've already got a problem developing in Western Europe because these governments don't represent their people. Macron doesn't. He's a dead man walking. Merz doesn't in Germany. He's a dead man walking. Starmer certainly doesn't in England. So you're going to have elections soon, and you're going to have different governments, and those governments are going to be more inclined for political power alone to listen to their people who don't like this war and don't like what's going on. So what are you going to do? Go back to a 1930s Europe with everybody kind of staring at each other over the barrel of a gun? I don't know, but it isn't a pretty picture right now. And Ukraine is making it even uglier. But how does that impact Southwest Asia? It's hard to say, except that the prospect is here. If things really were to go bad, the prospect is here to have a global conflict rather than just an isolated conflict in Ukraine, a little bit in Georgia, Azerbaijan, Armenia, and a lot in Southwest Asia that suddenly connects itself. And all of a sudden you've got a global conflict going on. And the fact that we don't have any nuclear weapon treaties at all now is really frightening too, because everyone's building out now. We are building to the tune of about $2 trillion. China is building to an equivalent tune of money, probably going to try to match us or Russia or both. I don't think they'll try to match us in combination, but they'll try to match either Russia or us. Pretty much the same in numbers. Russia has a few more than we do, but roughly 5,000 to 6,000. And China's going to build out to that, I think. already started. So, and no treaties. This is really scary too. This is a dangerous world from a nuclear point of view too. People are talking in this country about testing again. They're talking about testing underground. They're not talking about, thank God, atmospheric testing. But I hear people today talking about testing underground again, which I think is a huge mistake because we don't need to. We have sophisticated computer testing now that does the same thing actual testing does. Actual testing just lets you go like this, you know, I'm a nuclear power. I can explode a bomb. And it's dangerous because we got other people out there. We got other aspirants, you know. Iran and Israel are two cases in point, but you've got other people too, like Saudi Arabia, that would love to have a bomb. In fact, I think Saudi Arabia has made a deal with Pakistan. Were Iran to develop a nuclear weapon, visibly develop a nuclear weapon so that the Saudis could say, yeah, they got a nuclear weapon, Pakistan would give Saudi Arabia 20 overnight. You know, I think they got a deal. I really do. I think MBS took $20 billion up to Islamabad about 5 or 6 years ago. It was ostensibly to help them with the flooding, the really tragic flooding that happened. But I think some of it was to pay them for a future deal on nuclear weapons. I never forget that A.Q. Khan was the father of the Islamic bomb.
So just a couple of small questions. One is about the United Nations. Do you think this organization has now become completely defunct with absolute no utility? Or do you think after this war or after this conflict is over, a new formation needs to be casted?
Two answers there. One, yes, they pretty much destroyed themselves by allowing their reputation and their name to be attached by UN Security Council resolution to this mess in Gaza that Trump has invented, along with Jared Kushner, Tony Blair, and every other bandit and crook you can name. And two, because they have been utterly feckless in the face of the genocide in Gaza and in face of Ukraine, really, too, and also Southwest Asia. But having watched Kofi Annan and having watched Helen Clark, whom we kept from being Secretary General when she was a deputy and doing a really good job, and that's why we didn't want her to be Secretary General and back Guterres instead of Helen Clark. Helen Clark would have been telling us to go to hell in a handbag already. If you get someone like that in there who could really put muscle and voice behind the United Nations, you could make it potent again. I don't think that's going to happen because, you know, we, the Russians, the Chinese, and others get a vote on who's going to be Secretary General. But it could happen if there were a confluence of interests that suddenly made it happen. And we got a really good leader in there. We've had a couple, you know, in the history of the UN, we've had a couple of really good leaders who made a difference. And we also need major revision to the Security Council. We need to add some countries to the Security Council. We need to make it not a unanimous vote for action. Maybe add, there are 5 countries I would add, so it'd be 10. I might even take one out. I might even take Great Britain out and then have a 2/3 vote for a majority or whatever. You could revise and revamp the existing organization, put good leadership in, and I think it would be effective. Not as effective as everyone would like, but it still would be effective. I think that would be better than trying to design something from whole cloth. And the problem with that is once you stand the UN down, there's a lot of people in the world that don't want anything to replace it. So I wouldn't stand it completely down. I would revamp and revise.
So just the last question. I'm very thankful for your time. Is Donald Trump and the Republican Party facing a disaster in the midterm elections?
Yes, unquestionably. And that brings a huge problem. What are they going to do? P.D. Hegseth is shaping the U.S. Armed Forces into two armies. One that believes Jesus Christ is everything and will do anything for Jesus, and another one that says, you're crazy. And that's dangerous, because you could get a civil war inside the military. You could get the military fighting itself inside its own ranks. That's very dangerous, but it's something that Trump could take advantage of, using the ones that are Christian nationalists, if you will, the ones that are ready to follow Franklin Graham, the preacher, to defeat the others. Might not necessarily be violent either. It would just be a put down. The others would leave.
Thank you, sir. It's really a fascinating discussion. We covered a lot of things. I'm really grateful for your time, sir.
We did. We covered the world, didn't we?
Thank you.